Welcome to the film analysis, today with Barbie by Greta Gerwig. Almost all of us were excited for Barbie, but what we got is a culture war. Incels and Trump supporters rage against the film, leaving only one conclusion for the other side: the film must be great. Interestingly, those who oppose binary thinking are only ever capable of binary thinking. Barbie is not a good film. Not because the incels are right, but because the film falls short. It adds another stupid contribution to the culture war. Most annoyingly, the film starts off well. The first 30 minutes excel. It starts in Barbie land, not being coupled together from CGI, but made up of dolls, painted backdrops, and Barbie dream houses. It was quite complicated to create. The making-ofs illustrate how they worked, for example, to keep the perspectives, because these Barbie dream houses remain quite open. When the camera is situated on one house, you must see the other house in the background, and they have really managed to put this together into a world leaving one deeply impressed. We admire the brilliant achievements of set and costume designers here, and these brilliant achievements also oppose the false understanding of immersion. At present, it is assumed that immersion can be created through a great deal of reality. Think of Disney's real film adaptations or Cameron's 3D spectacles. Avatar. Sitting on a D-box seat allows for feeling everything depicted on screen. This idea of reality kills fantasy. Barbie takes a different approach. Gerwig shows puppet theater with people instead. We are willing to accept the analog sets as reality, as it's lovingly designed, exactly what children playing with dolls do. They are quite aware of Barbies being dolls and not alive. The children open the space of imagination and thus bring the dolls to life. And that's what the film does for us now. But we also must go along and believe in this world, and we do. We are drawn into this world. This own toy world where the dolls live is designed with an obsession for detail. The choreography, not just in the dance scenes, but in every movement, stretches from hilarious to perfection. Margot Robbie plays the stereotype Barbie, that is, the Barbie you think of first as soon as someone says Barbie. As in Groundhog Day, one day goes by like the other. The serial mass production of dolls also produces serial days. Barbie Land represents a matriarchy. The entire range of Barbies that Mattel produced over the decades reside there, from garbage disposal women to astronauts or US presidents, while there are also many Kens. Take the beach Ken, played by Ryan Gosling. They do not hold a single decision-making position. They are, if anything, just the appendage of the respective Barbie. The film shows playfully that Barbie can stand on her own, but Ken can't. He's always depended on Barbie, just like probably no one has owned Kens without the corresponding Barbie, but rather a child owned several Barbies and maybe a Ken or two. Then there is this scene on the beach with Barbie showing up. Everyone greets her with "Hi Barbie," and she answers the other Barbies, "Hi Barbie." But the beach Ken, played by Ryan Gosling, also seeks recognition, also wants to be greeted, also wants to be called "Hi Ken." But it's not that simple, because Ken can only exist if he is noticed. Only then does he become a whole person. For Barbie to see him, he must impress her, and so he comes up with the great idea of jumping into the surfer waves made of papier-mâché, resulting in some injuries. But at least he is recognized and acknowledged by Barbie. What are we witnessing here? Of course, the reversal of the patriarchal order into male domination, on which the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu writes the following. Masculine domination, which constitutes women as symbolic objects whose being is a being perceived, has the effect of keeping them in a permanent state of bodily insecurity, or more precisely of symbolic dependence. They exist first through and for the gaze of others, that is, as welcoming, attractive and available objects. They are expected to be feminine, that is to say, smiling, friendly, attentive, submissive, demure, restrained, self-effacing. And what is called femininity is often nothing other than a form of indulgence towards real or supposed male expectations, particularly as regards the aggrandizement of the ego. As a consequence, dependence on others tends to become constitutive of their being. End of quote. Bourdieu's writing applies exactly to the Kens, not noticed at all without the Barbies, dependent on behavior resulting in appropriate attention from the Barbies. Barbie could be a gaudy satire, but would be more interesting if it reached beyond gender. How do you break through the loop? Or is it even a way of life? We all know the breakout films, for example, The Truman Show, also quoted in Barbie. The former is a film about someone who doesn't know at first that he is in an illusory reality and wishes to enter true reality in the end. But what would happen if this loop were adopted? What if one doesn't try to escape it? All that would be very interesting. How would a doll's existence be imaginable? But unfortunately, the film takes a different direction and abruptly interrupts its spectacle after about 30 minutes, when Barbie suddenly thinks about death and her skin starts to age. What's going on? She must check with Weird Barbie, an outsider Barbie, a Barbie who has been cut down to size by the girl who owned her. The dress was shortened, the hair was ripped off. Weird Barbie advises our stereotype Barbie to go into the real world to find the girl that stereotype Barbie belongs to. A voodoo aspect is touched upon here, but it is not taken further, an aspect the film continually hampers with. There are some approaches, but they are generally not thought through. One would have to work further with this voodoo aspect. Why does this girl have to be found? What does this resolve? The film skips this, as well as the component of death and transience. For half of the film, it suddenly doesn't matter anymore, which is dramaturgically unsatisfactory. Barbie and Ken now enter the other world, our world, patriarchy, but that only works halfway. Ken gets the impression that the real world is ruled only by men, and Ken identifies with the male figures copying their habitus and finally wants to transfer the patriarchy to Barbie's land. He studies patriarchy in books. He travels back to the Barbie land to establish male rule there, a rule of the Kens. At the same time, however, the film cannot deny that there are indeed very influential women in the real world. And the film also cannot deal with the contradiction that on the one hand it criticizes that Barbie is now sexualized by men in the real world through gazes, but that at the same time Ken is also sexualized, for example, by a gay couple coming towards him. But again, the film doesn't know what to do with it, except to hint at it. Meanwhile, Barbie visits the Mattel company where only men work in the executive suite. The CEO, played by Will Ferrell, wants to pack Barbie in a box and take her back to Barbieland, but Barbie escapes, meets the woman who played with Barbie and her daughter. The three of them then set off for Barbieland and can't believe their eyes. Beach Can has now established the patriarchy. The Barbies are all brainwashed. Now they have given up their jobs and are only there to look after the Kens. This satirical battle of the sexes turns out to be endlessly lame. Unless you've been living under a rock for the last 15 years, you know it all and are not surprised by a single scene in any way. From mansplaining to damsel in distress, everything is negotiated, and also a few straw men are to be fought to render it a little more effective. But we only experience a principle of sequence here. Everything is ticked off and there is something for everyone, just as there is a Barbie for everyone. The film wants to consider all discourses. They seemingly had to put every New York Times column on the battle of the sexes into this film, and in doing so constantly produce contradictions or call up something which is left undealt with, leaving us with a supermarket feeling. In terms of dramaturgical logic, contradictions posed by the film should be resolved. But if you think in terms of supermarket logic, the contradictions don't have to be resolved. The laxative can be 1 meter away from the chocolate, the vegan food can be next to the meat. This film simply tries to trigger in a positive or negative way, but it doesn't try to tell anything itself particularly clear if compared to Olivia Wilde's Don't Worry, Darling. In it, a woman is oppressed, as are many other women, but one individual realizes that something is wrong, and we now watch this character think, come to a realization and finally escape from this situation. Don't Worry, Darling is told with coherence and clarity as applies to The Matrix or The Truman Show. Barbie, on the other hand, merely strings together Instagram tiles and TikTok videos. On top of that, it carries the message, you can be whoever you want to be. It's really all a question of self-confidence. The film is thus a child of pseudo-feminism, ignoring every economic and social question and only considering culture war. Men are either stupid or dangerous or both, and they are supposed to see towards the end that they somehow find themselves, find what they really want to be. And Beach Can is told he is not his girlfriend, not his job, not his property. But we must ask ourselves, what is Can? What kind of ego essentialism is it? Again and again, the Barbies and Kens in the film are supposed to find their ego, but later the film changes its tone. Suddenly, it is no longer meant satirically, but seriously, and you ask yourself, what is meant by this ego, and how exactly is it found? Little girls may want to become doctors, astronauts, or presidents, but harsh economic reality often prevents them from their path. It is not only a question of will, but often a question of student loans. The same when financial freedom is mentioned. One almost waits for Barbie to explain her investment plan, forgetting that most people earn far too little money to invest in shares at all. The contradiction makes this film stand out. The film permanently explains how much society shapes the self. Male pop culture produces mansplaining. Baby dolls ascribe the role of mother to girls at an early age. Crucially, economic existence determines consciousness, but the film ignores this and stumbles over its contradiction. It is not simply a question of wanting, and interestingly, the film itself shows it with Ken in the real world. Ken tries to become a CEO and a doctor in the real world, but it's made clear to him without the proper education, you are not going to have that career. It is not enough to just be a man and want it. So why is Ken able to establish this patriarchy so quickly? Well, the whole thing only works by brainwashing. Like a virus, this patriarchy has now come over the Barbies. However, no explanation is given as to how exactly this happened. How can it be that thinking subjects, Barbies, can suddenly be persuaded to serve men faithfully and abandon matriarchy? Since we are not told this, we must assume that we are not dealing with thinking subjects at all, but only with subjects who can be steered in one direction or another. Because that's exactly what the Barbies do with Ken by concocting a plan and saying to themselves, we just must make the men feel that we desire them, then they'll be ready for anything. The Barbies used their trick successfully and end up occupying the White House again. In short, an anti-intellectual and anti-political film. At no point does the film show how men and women could live together differently. That could have been spelled out, but there is no interest in that. It is a very colorful film, but characterized by black and white thinking, fitting to its strange sexualization discourse. On the one hand, we see these sexy beach bodies, but they are dolls without genitals. There is no sexuality between man and woman, nor between women and women or among men. Homosexuality is not an option. The whole Barbie land is asexual, which brings us very close to TikTok and Instagram. We are constantly presented with sexy poses, but please don't perceive them in a sexual way. Please don't sexualize it. Let's talk about another thing. In holy seriousness, people are always talking about expectations of women in the film, but this different tone of voice confuses. Sometimes it tends to be satirical before being serious again. And this holy seriousness has one purpose. It includes each criticism of Barbie, and even this Barbie-hating girl will love Barbie in the end. You just must believe in yourself. You must believe that you want to be a doctor or an astronaut, and then you'll be fine. In one respect, there is a terrific joke about this logic. There is a short commercial in this film of a depression Barbie, illustrating capitalism. If there is a market for a depression Barbie, Mattel will produce it. Now you can't accuse Mattel of making a profit, just as you can't accuse Christopher Nolan of wanting to make money off Oppenheimer. But we should ask ourselves, what kind of corporate logic are we accepting? Could a non-critical film have been made? Let's imagine this for a moment. When Barbie arrives at Weird Barbie Place, she is supposed to decide whether she reaches for the high heels and stays in Barbie land, or whether she reaches for Birkenstocks and thus enters the real world. That's a paraphrase of the famous red or blue pill scene from The Matrix. And when Barbie says she would rather have the high heels, would rather stay in the dream world, she is told that there's no such choice. You have to take the Birkenstock anyway. We are also confronted with this non-choice. Let's think about an alternative Barbie film. Could we imagine it like a Doris Day movie? There's Barbie, a young blonde woman who has fallen in love with Ken, but Ken doesn't pay attention to her, and so now she's trying to be successful in sports, so she can get noticed, and she promises him to be the mother of his children, etc. One would say, how is this possible in 2023? No one would praise this film, it would flop. Of course, if you want to create a successful Barbie film today, you must include all the criticism that exists about Barbie, about gender images, and so on. Self-criticism must be turned into cash. This criticism of Mattel stretches very far if it doesn't show a competing product, if it doesn't point to more beautiful and meaningful toys than Barbie dolls. We viewers are locked in Barbieland. We can't leave it because even our criticism has been included. One could certainly suppose the film to be uncritical of capitalism, and that is certainly true. But we must look closely. What do we mean by that? Patriarchy and capitalism have been allies historically, but they do not have to be allies in the future. It is possible to imagine a capitalism in which men and women are completely equal. It featured both genders being equally exploited as capitalism dictates. While women could enjoy a greater likelihood of becoming president or astronaut, the rules of exploitation wouldn't change, leading us to the film's crux. Let's ignore this gender debate, obstructing our view, and tend to Barbieland. In the first 30 minutes, we see Barbie's day begin twice. Barbie gets up in her incredible mansion. She waves to other Barbies in their dream mansions. Garbage disposal women downstairs also wave happily. Other service staff can be seen. What are we being subjected to? Everyone is happy in their place. For each place there is a special Barbie, even for the garbage disposal Barbie. Everyone is in their place and happy, reminding us of the animals in Barbie and the Lion King. We don't want to overdo it, but certain fascistic tendencies cannot be denied. While a certain diversity is conceded, the Barbie must be what the Mattel Corporation has devised for them. They cannot break out of this pattern. There is a society without conflicting interests, without class struggle. Whether service staff or president or CEO, they all form a national Barbie community lacking any conflicts of interest. No one will go on strike there, no one will demand higher wages. In principle, it is also possible to integrate the Kens into this hierarchical order, and this will happen in the end. A great harmonization. Even the girl who hates Barbie ends up loving Barbie, and all criticism is cancelled out and turned into plastic dolls and thus into products. The search for the self here only means that one should find one's Barbie and thus find one's place in a society of status. But the film does not question society's exploitation and hierarchies. Feminism refers to something else, however, a solidarity not only enabling individual women to pursue individual careers, but improving the situation of women and other oppressed people. This struggle only succeeds if one focuses on the economic, but the Barbie film replaces the economic with the cultural struggle. Unsurprisingly, this cult of the individual ends with the mother-daughter constellation. Barbie wants to enter the real world and entertains a long chat with Ruth Handler, Barbie's inventor. They hold hands, we see pictures of daughters and mothers, and when Barbie arrives in the real world, she takes the name of Ruth Handler's daughter. She now calls herself Barbara Handler. And we watch, but don't see. It would be nice if you would like to support the film analysis financially. You can do so via my bank account or PayPal. Also, you can find me on Patreon. Thank you very much.